before we get into the episode, just a quick warning that this episode does contain mentions of suicide and depression. Also, please be aware that we are just a bunch of artists and musicians who like to talk about subjects that are sometimes slightly beyond our wheelhouse. If we say anything that's inaccurate or just flat out wrong, please send us a nice email at postwavepodcast@gmail.com and let us know what we missed. Thanks.
Welcome to Postwave. You're here with Eric and Trevor, and we're joined by a special guest tonight, Alex White.
Hey, how's it going? I'm Alex White.
So Alex, maybe like introduce what we're talking about today and tell us how you started thinking about all this doomer stuff.
And real quick, before you do that, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Sure. I'm an interdisciplinary artist from Colorado. That means like I draw from photography, poetry, like writing articles and essays, music, painting, drawing. I just do all sorts of art, and I really like to, not that I like to, it just happens naturally. I incorporate whatever I'm thinking about at the moment into the art that I'm doing. But I would say that I'm primarily a musician. Like I went to college with Trevor and Eric. That's where we met and became friends and had some really cool improv jams with these guys. And we went to this one event in Longmont one time and did an improv session, and the guy afterwards came up to us afterwards like, do you guys want to be a part of a festival? And like gave us this card and everything, and it's super just very interesting. Never got back to us. We should hit him up.
Was that open mic at the library or something where we were doing the triggering the samples from the laptop? And
it was just super weird.
Yeah.
And they had free beer there and everything. And
that's right.
Yeah, that was fun. Yeah, and today we're talking about collapse and doomer, being a doomer. But I don't really like the normal colloquial term for doomer on the internet, because part of that includes sort of this incel nihilistic just really kind of nasty outlook on the world. I'm more of a doomer that is in circles that ecological thought and I don't know, try to have a positive outlook on things, what they would call a bloomer. You know what I mean? Someone who goes through the doomer phases and then's I don't know, maybe everything will be all right in the end. But,
So what exactly does a boomer believe?
Oh, bloomer, right?
A bloomer? I'm not 100% on it, but I think that a doomer believes that things are just bad. You know what I mean? A lot of it comes from alienation that sort of neoliberal capitalism and just neoliberalism in general kind of imposes on people, because we're these alienated subjects that have to go to work for 12 hours a day or whatever in some cases, and probably more. But even then, if you have an 8-hour job, you got to think that it takes you an hour to get ready, an hour to come home. Maybe you have a 2-hour commute, so you're spending all of your day, and that's just to kind of live, And apart from that, I think, I definitely don't speak for all doomers, because it's definitely a huge subculture on the internet, and I don't want to upset any doomers because they can be kind of trollish as well. And it's like, I just don't want to touch that bear. You know what I mean? I think the way that I look at it is through Collapse. And like, I'll just read the about section of Collapse on the Reddit that I have pulled up. Like, discussion regarding the potential collapse of global civilization defined as a significant decrease in human population and or political, economic, social complexity over a considerable area for an extended time. We seek to deepen our understanding of collapse while providing mutual support, not to document every detail of our demise. So...
Yeah, because I think as this guy Daniel Drumright mentioned in his article, like, it's a pretty lonely thing to be thinking about this stuff sometimes, because most people outside of this pretty insulated community will be like, "Oh no, you're crazy. Don't worry about it," you know.
Yeah.
So it makes sense that there's a community of people who've kind of come together on the internet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, like with any other thing that, like a normal in quotes, like, person would look at and be like, whoa, that's weird, or whoa, that's not my bag, man, you know?
Yeah.
Like,
I think part of it too is, I mean, like, people have been warning about the apocalypse. I mean, definitely since nuclear weapons became a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember, I don't know, my parents like told me at one point, like, oh yeah, you know, people have been saying the world's going to end since, you know, we were growing up too. And it's like, it can seem like everyone has that perspective, and therefore we should just kind of disregard it, because it's kind of also it kind of puts you at the center of the universe, because it
totally
implies that you're kind of like the most important generation, or like, you know, there's some, even if it's like insanely unlucky, insanely bad luck, it's still some kind of like privileged position within
significant
history, if that makes sense. Yeah, significant.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's kind of you have to balance, like, sure, people have been saying things are gonna end for a long time. You know, Al Gore, back when, like, we were just little kids, his whole platform was, hey guys, we're fucked, let's do something about it now. And of course, that didn't. An
inconvenient truth. That's still, like, depressing to watch too.
And it's still true.
Yeah, that's what's crazy about it, right? Is like, all of this really is happening, but yeah, like, you look outside the window and it's like there's birds and it's like the sun's out. It's a nice day. You can go for a walk, but
yeah.
There's all this, like, economic destruction. Like, if you get hit by a car and you survive on your walk and you don't have health insurance, then you're fucked.
Yeah. It's the whole like exponential growth thing, where it seems like it's not doing anything for a long time, and then all of a sudden it just shoots way up. And and
yeah,
especially with climate stuff, because there are so many potential feedback loops that could happen.
Yeah,
stuff just kind of, you know, goes haywire really quickly.
Right. Yeah, like, I think feedback loops are gonna really sort of kick us in the ass when they start kicking in.
Mm-hmm. So to what extent does environmental collapse play into societal collapse? Are they more or less tied together, or is the doomer, or whatever you want to call it, movement focusing on one thing or the other?
I tend to think that's a good question, because I think that, like, the more internet obsessed doomers tend to focus on society more, like what's wrong with society, the politics, sometimes the economics, even though that's a little bit more rare as well. But the people on Collapse definitely are more focused on, like, systems thinking, where everything sort of is tied in together and each thing affects the other. Like, the economy affects the environment, the environment affects the economy, affects the politics, affects the social situation, you know. Like, even being in hotter weather, like, affects the way that humans interact with each other. Like, they become, you know, grumpy and uh, like harder to deal with because they're just dealing with the weather.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think I was looking into that book, Overshoot, that you mentioned,
Mm-hmm.
Alex, and the whole thing, like a big idea in that is the idea of a carrying capacity, and we
Yeah.
have this kind of phantom. So carrying capacity, right, is just the amount of a population that a certain environment can sustain. And right now, because of all these technologies we have, like being able to produce better fertilizer, we have this what's called like a phantom carrying capacity. That's like, could be like as high as 4 times larger than the actual carrying capacity. And once
Yeah.
we kind of lose our technology that makes us able to have that higher phantom carrying capacity, it'll be like a huge catastrophe, because we just can't. There's no way we can support that big of a population without certain technology.
Yeah, it'll be like genocide by technology.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think that the number that he gives, I can't remember if it's 3 million or 3 billion, but I mean, either way, you're going to lose billions of people, because the earth can really only like sustainably hold like 3 billion or 3 million people. And like, that's definitely like a really taboo sort of thing to say. But especially if you're like a leftist, because then like eco-fascism comes in to the picture, and it's like that word gets thrown around a lot when people start talking about population, because we think that we should be able to hold, as many people as possible, or not as many people as possible. I'm not quite sure what I'm trying to say.
That it's like who are we to say who gets to live and who doesn't, or who gets to reproduce and who doesn't?
There's that. Yeah, there's definitely that, because like people are afraid of having the government impose like a child limit or something.
Yeah, which was disastrous in China, right?
I don't know much about that, but I've heard about it. I think there's a good like documentary on it and everything. Do you know about that?
I've watched some short documentaries about the subject, and everything that I've heard is basically just, oh my god, this is the worst thing that they ever did. It's not an effective solution.
Yeah. And that's the thing too, like it seems like there is no effective solution. Like the thing that John Michael Greer says is collapse now to avoid the rush. Like just kind of let everything fall apart. Because I mean, he thinks of it in like long cycles too, like 10 billion years from now. Humans will have gone extinct. There's going to be some other life form on the planet probably. That kind of thing. Like humans have a life cycle just like everything else. Ecology teaches us that everything has a life cycle, like birth, living, then death.
Did you say 10 million?
10 billion.
10 billion. Okay. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
who the hell knows?
Yeah.
And yeah.
Because I mean, think about what was going on 10 billion years ago.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, yeah, we would have to have like moved to another star system at that point, or have like carved out an asteroid and just be like a self-sufficient
Yeah.
population.
I'm interested in your guys' thoughts on that, because like I know that I definitely got to like remove myself from like sort of a collapse mind, because like a lot of people have different thoughts about solutions, or like what do you guys believe that, I mean, this might be a leading question because I'm like wanting to say that technology isn't going to solve this, but like I want to know if you guys think that, you know what I mean? Because I'm trying to like think of collapse, like when you become collapse aware, and like this is another thing that I think is important. I sent the link, the like decolonizing like our perspectives. Like I don't want to be like coming across as like the one who knows, and that like I'm shepherding you guys into becoming collapse aware or whatever, you know what I mean? Like I don't want to have such an arrogant view of myself, but like being collapse aware is like you go through these different phases of like denial and acceptance and like hedonism and nihilism and optimism, pessimism, like, and then eventually like you come to acceptance. But even when you hit acceptance, like you go back to the other phases and you're like, oh, maybe if we do this, or oh, I'm just gonna, be a hedonist. And like, but I'm curious what you guys think of it, collapse.
Yeah, so I mean, I've always thought or suspected that we'll be able to geoengineer our way out of climate change.
Yeah.
But not, I mean, yeah, like cloud seeding and doing stuff to the atmosphere sounds like probably a bad idea. But and I think in one of the papers he kind of went through a bunch of the different things like carbon capture and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. And like I think he said carbon capture, like you end up creating more carbon emissions, like trying to get that stuff going than it'll actually get out of the atmosphere. Yeah. The one thing he didn't mention that I've heard about is like a fleet of satellites with mirrors. Have you heard anything about that? Yeah, just
briefly through reading the thing.
Yeah,
that couldn't possibly go wrong.
Well, I mean, but it's not like you could potentially undo it or change it if it doesn't quite work right. Whereas if you put stuff into the atmosphere, at that point, it's like if it doesn't work or something goes wrong, you're kind of screwed. Mm-hmm. It seems like reversible in a way that a lot of these other geoengineering things aren't.
Right.
Yeah, I'm very skeptical that technology will be able to just magically fix any sort of problem we get ourselves into, even with a lot of trial and error, because our track record is not great. And if you look at, for example, what was that? There's like sort of a rodent in Florida that they introduced to keep the population of some other animal down, but then the rodent, or to keep the population of the algae down, which was killing everything. But then the rodent just went wild and the population exploded and became like a worse problem.
Yeah. I don't know. Have you seen that Kurt's I don't know how to say that, like the in the nutshell videos?
Kurzgesagt?
Yeah. They did an episode on geoengineering, I think.
Oh, and yeah.
I think it's pretty good. Like I always like looking at the collapse subreddits reactions to those. Mm-hmm. Like they're always like, oh, it's just more techno bullshit,
Yeah.
And I think that's where like ecological and systems thinking comes in. Like when you introduce one thing to save or to like fix or influence a particular thing, like that algae population, or
the old lady who swallowed the fly.
The story. What about it?
Oh, just that it's you know that children's song. You ever sing that when you were a kid?
Yeah.
There was an old lady who swallowed a fly. She swallowed a frog to catch the fly. And it goes on and on. And swallowed something to catch the frog. Like
we don't know the consequences of our actions ahead of time, but there will be consequences.
Yeah, I mean, Eric's going to give me a hard time, but if we get to AGI before this all happens, there is a chance that could come up with some solution to this whole thing.
If panpsychism is true.
it's the two things I have to bring up every time we talk about it.
This reminds me of that time we were on psychedelics.
I mean, yeah, so that's a long shot, but I mean, there are people who say that might happen by 2040, and it is one of those, like, it's always 20 years away type things. I mean, it's same thing with nuclear fusion. I mean, that's been the joke is that it's been 20 years away for like 40 years or something.
They were talking about that in the 70s, weren't they? Like 70s and the 80s. I think he talks about that in Overshoot.
But I mean the other thing is, I mean, this wouldn't prevent collapse on Earth, but I mean, if we get a population on Mars, it's possible that could be just another refuge for for humanity at least. Although if Earth collapses, then and the Mars population is still pretty small and like requires support from Earth, that could still, end badly.
Mm-hmm. And to me, it seems quite plausible that through technology we really could survive in space. The book Seven Eves explores this concept pretty vigorously, although it is science fiction, but it poses if we put our minds to it, we could probably do it. But the thing about it is that sort of existence to me seems so marginal and so desperate that it almost doesn't seem worth it to me. Like, sure,
it sort of implies. Go ahead.
Just to finish that off, I'll say it's sort of sure, we're surviving. The human race is surviving, but at what cost? What of ourselves are we losing in order to accomplish that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was gonna say it sort of implies the destruction of Earth, anyways. Like that our hope is to colonize space because the Earth is fucked. Like, it's already sort of conceding the point that we don't have any hope here.
Yeah.
But
and it's only ever going to be for a very, very small fraction of the population.
Yeah, like the super wealthy too.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
it's like, yeah, I don't know. That's the other thing I probably should bring up in this too, is that like should probably not think about this so much, like I think I'm in a good place to explore this kind of thing just because it interests me, and I have a lot of sort of coping mechanisms and support, and like I'm not dealing with a whole lot, but like it's not good to obsess about this because it's really bad for your mental health.
Yeah.
Like if any of this makes you feel bad, like reach out to a friend or to someone you trust, or there are resources out there like hotlines, and there's even a subreddit collapse support for this specific issue, because it's kind of hard to talk to people about this. Like you can't and like there's scientific evidence that like suicidal ideation and stuff like that is contagious, so
Yeah.
like if you are feeling suicidal, then like your friends, if they have that kind of latent in them, then that can trigger it for them. And like it's just, we want people to have support and be good.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I had a lot of resistance just to reading the articles you guys sent me. Like just knowing that we were going to talk about this subject, it was very challenging for me to even make myself aware of the situation to a certain extent.
That makes sense. Yeah.
I'm kind of with you, Alex. I have like a kind of like morbid fascination, I guess, with like apocalyptic stuff. And still, like, I mean, like, I don't know, this is how I feel about a lot of like darker philosophy stuff, like antinatalism too. It's like you read about it, it's like, oh, this is interesting, and like, well, what if they're right? And and it's kind of dark, but then when you're at a low point, it can just like hit you in the, like, smack you in the face when you're not ready for it, and it's like, oh shit, like now I get why people said be careful around this stuff. So yeah, it's like another exponential thing. Like you dip your toes in with like antinatalism, and then you go onto the collapse subreddit, and then like you just keep going deeper and deeper into this stuff, and like then it just kind of all hits you at once, and it's like yeah. So I mean, this whole collapse thing is kind of connected to the antinatalism thing, right?
Yeah.
Because a lot of people who are choosing not to have kids now, the reason they give is that they're worried about their kids having to live through some kind of ecological catastrophe or something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like
or just worsening conditions, like continued worsening conditions. Because, I mean, I just think of like things are just going to become physically impossible. Like, that's just kind of the reality of things.
Could you go into some details about like the actual ways that might happen?
Yeah, sure. Like, I mean, the whole thing is kind of like peak oil, peak everything. The idea of peak is the thing. You know, you only have a certain amount of a resource. Like, we had tons of oil, and the energy return on investment was huge for that. And the energy return on investment means that the amount of time and energy that we spend getting the oil out of the ground is worth less than the amount that it gives us back. So, like, it gives us back way more energy than we spend on getting it. And peak oil, I think, means that sort of goes down. Like, if there was an EROI before of like 100 to 1, the ratio, now it's down to like 4 to 1. You know what I mean? And it's just going to keep getting lower and lower and lower because we're running out of oil. And then we're going to switch to coal and natural gas. But natural gas is just making the methane leaks a lot worse. And, you know, the thing with electric cars, because that's sort of the thing that people like think, like, oh, just switch to renewables. Electric cars use rubber tires, and rubber comes from oil. And they also use rare earth minerals for their engines and other features. And same with like wind turbines and stuff. Like, it's all just pollution and like nonsense. We have to like degrow, but that's probably not going to happen just because of the vested, like, vast interests of things. Am I explaining it?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know.
Like,
I mean, it's always way more complicated and nonlinear than people make it out to be.
For sure.
And the big problem with renewable energy, I think, or one of the big problems, is that we still don't really have an efficient way to store energy for long periods of time.
Yeah.
And like the thing with wind energy and solar too is like it's kind of unpredictable when you're going to get it. And
right.
So it's and we don't currently have a way to store it on a large scale. And so that's one of the big problems we haven't solved yet.
Yeah. And like, so I read a post on Collapse Support the other day about like actual actionable things that we could do. And I mean, it's mostly just to stop the like myth of growth and to try to degrow. And that means, you know, just changing the way that everything is structured. Like,
so the myth of growth being the idea that we can continue to expand as a population.
Expand as a population. Expand. It's, you know, it's kind of like an economic thing that I don't understand very well. Like, it's, you know, because every year we have to make more money in order for like our economy to work, I think.
Well, it's like GDP growth, right?
Yeah, GDP growth. And in order to do that, we have to use more and more resources, which we don't have. I think it's really interesting, but it's really funny and it's really tragic.
Yeah, well, I mean, I kind of want to jump to, oh man, the stock market's all bullshit. It's all made up. But money isn't worth anything off the gold standard. But doesn't Guy McPherson, like he like gives stock reports as part of his like weekly updates, doesn't he?
I think so.
I like listened to one of them and he I think he was kind of talking about that, how like this week, which is the week of December 6th, he was like, yep, everything's really shit now, but the stock market is like up
higher than ever, right?
Yeah, higher than ever. It's like
just waiting for the next pop.
So bizarre.
Yep. It's coming too. It's going to be like bad.
Yeah, I mean the dollar's going to crash at some point is what I've heard.
Probably. And that's the other thing too, though, is like probably within like the next 20 years, if you're like giving it a nice amount of time. to crash,
Mm.
you know?
Mm-hmm.
And like, I just read today on the Reddit, like, you know, who knows who these people are? It's probably all bullshit. Not all bullshit, but a lot of it's just some random dude on the internet saying some shit. But he said something like, or she, could be she, or non-binary, could be a cat, right? It's the internet. A sentient cat, the very first sentient cat.
Eats those
Anyways, they were saying that, you know, why don't we just take some of the money away from the military to fund, you know, basic needs of our population? And someone replied that the military, the United States military, is what's keeping the dollar strong. So the less military might that we have, the less, you know, investors will want to invest in our our company, our country.
I mean, couldn't that also just be the fact that the government isn't injecting that much money into the military industrial complex? Like it's like buying so much from the military industrial complex that it's like inflating the economy.
You know, I've heard that term, the military industrial complex, a lot, and vaguely I have a sense of what it means. But could you put a finer point on that for me?
I'll try. I mean, I think the term comes from Eisenhower's like last speech as president, which is kind of funny because he, you know, I mean, he was a president, so he's, you know, this probably will offend some people, but, you know, he's one of the most vile people in the earth, like living during the time that he said that. And he kind of like preached about, oh, you know, the military industrial complex, blah, blah, blah. But, you know, meanwhile, you were a general. And after you left, I'm pretty sure he went into the Pentagon. I don't really know. I'm probably making myself sound like a jackass here, but I think it's sort of also tied to this one general. I think it's William Smetley Butler. Might be William. Might be something else. But he has his book that's pretty short read. I think it's worth a read. You can find it for free on the internet. Called War is a Racket. And it's like sort of, I mean, it's all just like one big money scheme, practically. Like who was fueling the Nazis in World War II? You know, we were giving them fuel, and not only us, but like this whole like system. And I think the military industrial complex. I haven't read about it recently, so it's kind of vague in my mind. But
Trevor, do you have an idea?
I mean, yeah, I could try to define it. I mean, I think it's basically like, you know, we have all these companies like Northrop Grumman and Lockheed Martin and, you know, whoever makes all the rifles and the tanks and that kind of thing that, you know, are I mean, I don't know the exact figures, but if you look at how much like one fighter jet costs, it's like completely insane.
Like several $100 million.
Yeah, like
Yeah,
I think
something
the
like that.
F-35 is some ridiculous amount of money.
Yeah. And, you know, like aircraft carriers and, you know, just all the fancy shit that just keeps getting turned out.
Yeah, and I mean, like, the internet and our phones were developed with military funding.
Yeah, I mean, there's space stuff involved too, and satellites.
Yeah.
And like research and development for some crazy weapons technologies none of us have heard of yet.
Yeah.
And, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I think the internet was actually conceived as like a sort of tracking thing. There's this guy, Yasha Levine, I think is his name. He wrote a really good book on it.
I thought the internet was like a college's
Yeah, that's what I heard.
like
as well.
wanting to communicate with each other thing.
I think that's definitely part of it. But it was a part of this thing called like Operation Phoenix in Vietnam. Like to sort of, he has his book, Surveillance Valley, The Secret Military History of the Internet. And I'll just read the like description of it. Because I think it's a really worthwhile thing for people to know. Tracing it back to the Pentagon counterinsurgency surveillance project, a visionary intelligence officer, William Godell, realized that the key to winning the war in Vietnam is not outgunning the enemy, but using new information technology to understand their motives and anticipate their movements. This idea, using computers to spy on people in groups perceived as a threat, both at home and abroad, drove ARPA to develop the internet in the 1960s and continue to be at the heart of the modern internet as we know and use today. As Levine shows, surveillance wasn't something that suddenly appeared on the internet. It was woven into the fabric of the technology. So, yeah, it's pretty interesting. The book Inherent Vice by Thomas Pynchon goes into that a little bit. It's pretty interesting. They didn't show it in the movie, which kind of makes sense because Hollywood and like the whole film industry is like CIA Central, baby. You know, look at all these cool guns and weapons. Fuck yeah. You know, like they're part of the military industrial complex. Like Marvel movies are like,
God,
look at all this fucking sick military shit. Fuck yeah.
Sex and violence.
Yeah.
Did you guys ever watch that Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. show? I watched like a couple episodes. It's Marvel. It's like the moral of every single episode is just trust us. Just trust the government. They know what they're doing. They have good reason for the secrecy.
Yeah, the CIA is your friend, you know? Like, yeah, it's crazy.
Mm-hmm. There's something to that. So, coming back to the doomer thing, it seems to me that there's a couple different approaches that people tend to take. One is complete fatalism. There's nothing we can do. And the only thing worth doing at this point is coming to terms with what's going to happen of our eventual demise and face it in a graceful and a peaceful way. The other approach being, let's find a solution for this, either to avoid collapse or else to make the best of it when it does happen.
Yeah,
for sure. I think that's where like it kind of ties back in to whether or not you are like sort of a digital native. Like if you go into the like internet culture, like there's, I think the terminology for that to get technical here with the shit posting words, like is like lay down and die, I think is one of them. Like just kind of like accept it, like you know, we're fucked, nothing we can do, just lay down and die.
Did they abbreviate it as LDAD?
I think so. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm curious about
like
curious about that one. What do you guys think about that? And like, does that, like, it, assuming that we do know with pretty good certainty that there's nothing we can do and that this is going to happen, do you think it makes sense to lay down and die, or should we fight to the very end despite not being able to come to terms with our death peacefully?
I mean, I think one of the authors of the two articles we looked at mentioned this, but like if you're responsible for other people, like if you're a parent with young children, then I think you do have some kind of responsibility to like basically look out for their needs, you know, as much as you can. And I think, you know, I think there is something to be said for just, you know, trying to make sure it's going to be as okay as possible for those around you and the people you care about. But then on the other side, like he also mentions that, you know, you are kind of by default taking resources away from other people, like no matter what you do. So you have to be aware of that as well. And I think that isn't that kind of where the whole like lay down and die thing comes from? Is that you just, you know, another person taking up resources and it's like the ethical thing to do to just kind of let it happen?
I think so. I think a lot of trolls use it as like a cudgel against people as well, though. Like, because, you know, there are definitely a lot of sadists out there that just like to just get off on attacking people on the internet. And Like I was reading, there was a big post the other day on Collapse about like what they should do about suicidal posts, and I was reading through the top comment, and the guy was like, man, just the other day, you know, some 13-year-old came on here and posted about like, I read like the subreddit and now I'm suicidal. And, you know, he was getting attacked over and over again by just some random dude. And like, I think that's partly where that comes from, but there definitely are people that are thinking about it in sort of like an ethical way. And I think that they, you know, like I think maybe a joke that people make sometimes is like, well, humans are the biggest, you know, polluters. So if you just lay down and die, then you will no longer be polluting. But that's, you know, I think like some people kind of consider the ethics of taking your own life, and like if you should have a choice, and that kind of comes to like euthanasia and stuff like that. And I don't know, I kind of want to steer clear of all of these topics generally, just because it's, you know, such a touchy subject for so many different people. But
Yeah.
but like along with the lay down and die thing, I think the other side is like just being resilient. And I think that resigning yourself to it is really unhealthy in some sort of ways. Like, I think acceptance is important, but then doing some sort of action is good for you, because stress without action, you know, it kind of comes back to that Alcoholics Anonymous sort of thing, like having the courage, what is it? Like, be willing to accept the things you cannot change and the courage to change the things you can, or maybe it's the other way, I don't know. But there are things you can do for yourself at least, and for other people. Like, definitely can be accountable to other people. It's just it's about mitigating the effects of it as much as possible, because I think it's inevitable that it's going to happen. So you need to do something about it, even if it's just making it less worse, you know?
I think that's a really valuable way to look at it.
I wrote down a thing that I paraphrased from the Reddit the other day that I wanted to share too, that I think is kind of related. Like, we have these ideas of fixing climate change, but that's like misguided and ignores the science that's out there, because climate change is going to happen regardless, with or without us. And like, we should take responsibility for our actions and begin to adapt to the changing world. Like, that one article is deep adaptation. And like, there's no going back to normal. And adapting doesn't mean buying an AC window because the temperature is rising. It means adapting our livelihood, our buildings, our transportation infrastructure, and the fundamentals of our existence to be able to live in a hotter world, a world that will have less and less resources. Like, and yeah, there's that one post that has like all the different things that you can do. Like, there's transition town networks. I'm excited, like something that I'm doing to take some sort of action. It's a small thing, but I got awarded a scholarship for this new American farmstead class. One of the teachers of the class is the guy that sort of was on the ground floor of the transition town movement. So I'm excited to like learn some stuff from him. And the course is called Surviving the Future, Conversations for Our Time, and says, we are delighted to have you join us on this journey as we pull back, share conversation, and discover meaningful responses with some of the most compelling people offering hope in troubled times. So like, it's still kind of like about hope, and I struggle with that word hope, like, because I think that it's probably better to be hopeless, because hope is sort of, it keeps you thinking that things can go back to what it was, or, you know, like, I think hope has to take a new meaning, maybe like hope for less destruction and less things, not hope for something better, because there's not going to be anything better, I don't think.
Yeah. I mean, hope can just be denial if you don't do it in the right way.
For sure.
I think it has to be just hope that like you personally are able to deal with it in the best way that you can, like psychologically.
Yeah, rather than praying for some sort of Hail Mary solution.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This whole subject to me feels like there's a really strong parallel between my own experiences with having a loved one who is terminally ill, and that process of coming to terms with that this is something that is actually happening. There's nothing you can do to reverse that.
Yeah.
And trying to find meaning in that situation where you know that that's what it is, that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, there are a lot of parallels between a dying person and a dying society, for sure.
I remember earlier in the conversation you were talking about the grieving, the 5 stages of grief as it pertains to coming to terms with collapse.
Yeah, there's some really good stuff written about that out there that I encourage anyone listening to this to seek out and read. Unfortunately, I don't have any of it like saved or anything, but well, there's one. I think it's like, look into Joanna Macy, because she does really great work on that sort of acceptance, and she actually has a book called Active Hope, and I think it's about not passively hoping for things to get better, but sort of engaging with the process of the dying of everything.
Which is totally different from lay down and die, right?
Totally, yeah. Which, I don't know, I think lay down and die is like, could be considered a stage of like a stage of becoming collapse aware. You know what I mean? Like, that's the kind of like fatalistic stage of it.
Just like coming to terms with the severity that, like, yeah, there's actually people out there who are considering this, so this is maybe something worth considering.
Yeah.
It seems like the depression phase of the 5 stages of grief to me.
Yeah, definitely. There's a really great visual on the Let's Talk This collapse that sort of shows the different stages of collapse. I'm gonna pull it up and just like read through it, because I think it's really cool on this website too. There are people you can call. Like, there's this website called doomersupport.org, and it's like just this lady called Anne who will like take a phone call from you. It's pretty cool. I like looked at
just like emotional support.
Yeah, she'll just like give you a call
type stuff.
I think she's trained in like grief therapy and stuff like that. So there are definitely resources out there. Yeah, so this graph, it's called like barriers to understanding, and like there are barriers to understanding what collapse is, and just kind of, I mean, understanding. I'm still really learning what that word means. Like, to truly understand something, like you kind of like have to embody it and like know it in your bones, I think is a thing that like this poet Fred Moten, I think is how you pronounce his name, says when he's talking about books that people don't truly understand. He's like, they don't know the bones of the book, they don't like know it in their bones. And these things maybe do seem really obvious, but just with our coping mechanisms and everything, you just kind of like deny things or push them away, or actively choose to be ignorant of them. Like there's like nescience, ignorance, then it goes down to complexity, misinformation, and propaganda. One more layer down is apathy, skepticism, fatigue, fear, denial. One more layer down, optimism, cosmeticism, technologism, and hope. Another layer down beyond that is sort of like ideological things like pessimism, cynicism, nihilism, hedonism. Then you get to acceptance, and then there's even a further level after that called reality. So it's like, that's kind of interesting to me. Like, what is reality in terms of like, maybe it includes like all of these different levels, you know, like the fact that acceptance probably comes with like different phases of optimism or technologicalism or like apathy mixed in with like some cynicism. Like there's this idea like maybe you draw from all of them at certain points, and like I don't know, that's interesting.
Is this specifically in reference to this like doomer stuff, or is this just
to
kind
like
of
collapse awareness?
Yeah,
but I'm sure there are parallels to grief,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, what it kind of makes me think of is like reality is there and you're always approaching it, but you're never actually going to get there to actually comprehending reality fully accurately. Because you can't really, well, one, you don't know what the reality actually is, like for sure. And even if you could know, you wouldn't be able to hold it in your head like all at once.
Right, because every perception is subjective, right?
Yeah, and it's just so complicated.
And like our reality is shared, and we like make it together, you know. So
totally,
there's no way that you yourself can know it unless you just can't.
If you're finding this podcast valuable so far, we'd really appreciate if you consider supporting it somehow. You can follow us on social media on Instagram or Facebook. You can also go follow us on YouTube. You can subscribe to us on your favorite podcasting platform and give us a good rating there if you're on a platform that supports that. Thanks for listening.
Yeah, this shit's been seeping into my art like crazy lately. Like, just everything. I mean, I'm kind of obsessed with it. You know what I mean? So, I mean, I wonder what stage I'm at. Like, I'm probably at like the complexity phase. Like, I'm pretty far up there. But like, I know I've like DM'd you guys like, oh, I'm just gonna be a hedonist from now on. Like, and like you guys have known me through like nihilist phases and shit, where like I was smoking cigarettes and like just being like, everything sucks, man. I'm like, I'm still like that, and I probably always will be like that. But like,
could you talk a little bit more about how this has affected your art?
Yeah, for sure. Like, I'm working on an EP right now that is pretty much all collapse centered, and like I was just part of this poetic license grant that like I did some poetry and art. I can like read it and show it to you guys.
Please, yeah, we'd love that.
And like the titles for my EP that I'm thinking of going with, I'm like obsessed with 6, the number 6. So I always try to do 6 things. But this time there were just so many things that I wanted to include. So I did like the title and then like a subtitle. So there are 12 things, but it's like 6 tracks that I'm going to do. Like Passage of Time, parentheses, 6th Great Extinction, because we're in that currently. Like loss of biodiversity is probably the biggest thing that's happening right now and might be the worst thing. Oh, there's also peak soil that's going to happen. Like our soil's just going to stop providing us nutrients, and there'll be mass famines, whatever. There's degrowth, which I'll call obsess. PFOA, like PFOAs are these like chemicals that Dow created, or was it Dow or DuPont? Is that the same company? I don't know.
I should know. I think they're different.
But like DuPont created this one chemical to like go into Teflon, and I'm sure your parents had Teflon, or even your parents had Teflon in their house. I mean, you might still have Teflon in your house. Like Scotchgard is like another thing, and like all it got into the water. Like 99% of the water in the earth is infected with this stuff, and it's in our bloodstreams, and it's known to cause cancer, and like all sorts of birth defects, and like this lawyer sued them and proved that like they knew they were doing it, and it's insane. And next to that one, I put hope, like it's kind of like a cheeky thing, like like our water, like our source of life, is infected with everything, with death, and like I just think that hope is kind of insane. The earth is generous, and I'm calling that plastic. Press 1 for prayer now. I'll call it chicken bones, and then good night soil. Do you guys know what night soil is?
No.
I don't really know either, but I just know that it's like human shit used for fertilizer and like stuff like that. So I thought, good shit, good night soil. And I'm calling that one nuclear. And the reason I do plastic, chicken bones, and nuclear is because there's this one article called the Capitalocene instead of like the Anthropocene.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and like the like Earth's crust is made up of what is it, like trees, which is coal, I think. Dinosaurs' bones, which is like oil, and some other bullshit. And our thing, like 10 billion years from now, like our like time in like the grand scheme of things is going to be filled with chicken bones, nuclear waste, and plastic. Like that's what our geological crust is going to be. And like this other, I mean, I'm sure the podcast people can't see this, but
yeah.
Anyways, it's like a poem that I made for this poetic license grant that I got from the Boulder Writers Warehouse. We're doing this like collaboration. These other people are gonna like do a big canvassing of all this art and everything, and there's a couple other poets, and I'm excited that I got it, and I'm glad that I got to do this. And
yeah, congrats.
This is like the poetry for it. Surely we could do better. Demand the impossible burger. Do we want to legitimize our demise? Domesticate explosion. But does it affect me? Feedback loops, wire hours. Panic, don't. Give in to fear. Crying culpable collective corrections seek to be a blessing. Red plus sign at capacity, you're on your own with your fragile bones. Agonized acceptance. Yeah. And like I can kind of explain all these things. Like demand the impossible is like I think a slogan from the civil rights movement or something, and I just thought adding burger on the end of that, like if it demand the impossible burger was funny, because it's like going vegan would really help a lot of the thing, but even developing the impossible burger is like bad for the environment because of all the energy and everything that it uses. And like, let's see what else, like feedback loops, I included that in there. Like red plus sign at capacity, like the hospitals are just going to continue to be overwhelmed and everything. Like we built this kind of hospital industrial complex that like has extended our lives, you know, for quite a long time. And they kind of, Stephen Jenkinson is where I get this idea from in his book Die Wise. Like he talks about how the hospital system, he's like a grief worker, so he works with people that are dying and kind of tries to get them to accept their death and the families, and he just kind of works through everyone with the whole thing. And like we're these really fragile creatures that kind of are now reliant on, you know, hospitals. Like, because if you broke your femur in the wild, you were fucked. Like some animal would just come and eat you. Like your pack would probably leave you. I mean, there's a lot of evidence against this, actually, I think, though. So I might just be talking over my ass, because I know that some of the old like hunter-gatherer societies would nurse their people back to health, which is really cool.
Mm.
But for the most part, if you broke your femur, you're in some pretty deep shit. But now it's like you can probably go to the hospital and get it like braced up and get some morphine going for you, and like when we lose the hospital industrial complex, imagine the different plagues and everything that are going to happen and what that is going to do to our populations. And I don't know. It's like, I definitely don't enjoy this at all, Like, I think some people get sort of... I think that's a half-truth. Because, like, part of me is like, yeah, all of this sucks for so many different people. It sucks for me. It sucks for my family. It sucks for you guys. Like, and then part of me, when this pandemic hit, I was like, just glad that everything kind of caught up to where I was at. Just this kind of like, shut in, like, person who is alienated from society and doesn't, throw myself a pity party here, but that when this hit, it just kind of was like, now, like, all of this bullshit is just kind of revealed to everyone. But I mean, not everyone, because I mean, I'm rambling, so.
That's all good. I mean, I wouldn't say I'm like, I mean, as someone who doesn't like feel the need to interact with people a whole lot, I'm doing kind of okay.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
It's like I feel like I'm, at least from the social isolation stuff, I'm like pretty content with the amount of like the very low amount of social interaction I have right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I definitely have been feeling a lot of strain from that. Although I have in the past felt isolated even before the pandemic, but I had started to come to the realization that that's at that time it was self-inflicted, and now I guess I have a nice excuse, but
for sure.
I've been finding satisfaction and peace in breaking my isolation and having people that I allow myself to have contact with, and just accepting that risk for myself, because if I know that I can isolate from the general populace and yet still expose myself to people who are themselves already taking some amount of risk in exposing themselves to the same group of people, like that's I don't know, that's an acceptable risk for me. I feel like if I were to have to live in isolation indefinitely, I would probably lose sight of my desire to continue existing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That'd be kind of a breaking point.
Yeah, I mean, it's all relative.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't want to live in total isolation either.
Yeah, I don't think we can. Like social animals. We'd go crazy, right?
Yeah.
Physical touch, I mean, that's
too,
such a huge thing, and that's like the one thing that is being denied people most in the current situation.
For sure.
Yeah. So bringing it back to the collapse type stuff, I was wondering, Alex, if you could talk a little bit about this nuclear containment catastrophe idea that people mention a lot.
Oh, right. Well, I think this is the problem, that we have, I think it's 4,400 nuclear stations or something like that. And a lot of them are by the sea, which will rise and destroy them. And all of that waste from that is going to contaminate the ocean further, which, I mean, we were blowing up nuclear bombs in the ocean pretty much nonstop in the 50s, I think. But I mean, I think even past like the sea, the ones that are by the sea, like the problems with that, the ones that are inland or, you know, wherever, they're so complex to keep together that when our systems start to fail in many ways and we don't have enough resources to sort of go towards like nuclear containment, you know, there's going to be a lot of theoretically like nuclear facilities that just kind of can't hold the waste anymore. That's my like very basic understanding of it.
Yeah, I guess I don't really know what the whole process of just containing and holding on to nuclear waste is. Like, I mean, I always just assumed it was sitting there in, you know, whatever lead lined, like, you know, feet thick walled containers it's in, like, you know, it doesn't really need too much input from the outside world, but there's probably like, I don't know, lots of upkeep that needs to happen and stuff like that.
Yeah, there's lots of upkeep and there's a lot of electricity that goes into it. So, I mean, if like things just start falling apart at the seams, you know, like power outings and stuff like that. And I know that they have like probably backup power and stuff, but I mean, what if the power just never comes back on? That backup power is going to eventually run out as well. And I don't really know like how they would, like, I think that ultimately they would need to be decommissioned, like all of those things, in order for it to be truly safe. Because I mean, nuclear containment relies on the growth that we see, you know, like it relies on business as usual. And I mean, that's just kind of the principle of the thing. I definitely can't go into any of the technical stuff on it, but a lot of people write about it. And I know, I think Guy McPherson that's like one of his biggest fears is like, what's going to happen to all the nuclear facilities when there's like an EMP attack, or is it EMP or EMT? I don't know what it is, but EMP, like, you know, our whole electric grid goes down and they can't contain it. Yeah, it's kind of like, this goes back into complexity that we've built this incredibly complex society, and the more complex it is, the harder it is to keep up, and the harder it will fall when it inevitably falls, because civilizations just don't last.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I think the longest running civilization right now is China, but I'm not 100% on that. Like, we're only 200 years old as a nation, or what, like 300 years old? 200, 217. Yeah.
I'm in U.S. history class, like, now I can know that number. But
and I mean, like, societies typically only last 200 to 300 years. Like, there have been thousands of societies that have risen and fallen. And I don't know. It's just
I mean, you could argue, I think I would argue you can't really look at it on a country by country basis now, because it's also interconnected. But
globalization.
Yeah. But I think the thing that I think about a lot is, you know, even if you had like a blueprint to make a computer, if you didn't have a way to mine all the, you know, all the rare metals and materials, and, you know, smelt the metals and all that kind of stuff, or, you know, make the plastic, you know, get the oil to make the plastic.
Right.
Like, there's no way you're going to make the computer, because you just don't have the whole like supply chain for all those materials if the civilization collapses. Yeah,
I don't know. I've been I feel like one of those like Wojaks, you know, the like memes of like the guy with like the huge brain and I'm like sitting on it, you know. But like whenever I look at Twitter or like anything now and like I see people getting in squabbles about whatever, I'm just kind of like, you know, we're doomed no matter what. But I don't know. Maybe I do like being a know-it-all, but it's not a good look.
Yeah, I mean, it gives you an interesting perspective on environmental debates because, you know, people are hemming and hawing about how much, you know, what we should be doing, you know, different measures to stop climate change and carbon credits and, you know, renewable energy and electric cars and all that stuff. But it's like and that's like such a heated debate. But in the end, it's probably not gonna, you know, it's not gonna matter. Like there's no way it's gonna help. And actually, that actually connects to something I wanted to talk about, which is this idea of a biological imperative, which I find real interesting. I mean, it kind of goes back to like the idea of humanity being like a virus or a bacteria or something, you know, that's just gonna take up as much space as it possibly can, you know, without any foresight of you know, overshooting a carrying capacity or anything like that.
Right.
Because that's just like what life is designed to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, like looking at mold in a petri dish or like yeast populations in alcohol that they'll grow and grow until they don't have any resources anymore, and then they'll all choke and die in their own refuse.
Yeah. Yep.
I think that William Catton Jr. uses yeast as like a central like metaphor for us. Like we're just like the yeast, you know? Like every, you know, biological thing does the same thing. Like
yeah.
And
the tragic thing is that we're aware of, or, you know, some people are aware, some people are aware that, you know, of what is happening. And still, like, there's no way we're gonna stop, you know, like we have the curse of knowing what's happening without being able to do anything about it.
Yeah, there would have to be like a giant, like, conscious, like, shift.
Yeah, a coordinated effort, everyone on the same page trying to fix the thing.
Yeah, we need that. What do they call it? We need the singularity because it's the only thing that can get us on the same page.
Yeah, that's our Hail Mary right there. Huh?
That's like the technohopium, though, isn't it? Yeah.
It's kind of interesting though, because like, I mean, I don't want to rely on it because it's not here yet, and so maybe it won't save everything like some people hope. But I don't know. Don't you guys kind of get the sensation that every part of our existence on this planet as a whole is sort of approaching a peak? You know, it's maybe that peak is collapse, or maybe that peak is transformation and rebirth into a new undefinable or undescribable technological world. But it kind of feels like we are approaching something, right? I mean, or do you get that sensation?
I don't get that. That sounds interesting though. Like, I mean, if I did get it, I would just like sort of write it off as like, you know, advertisements selling me, you know, something for my whole life that is like, you know, if you do this next thing, then you're gonna get the desire that you are looking for. You're gonna fill that hole, you know, fill the void. That's interesting, though.
But it seems like you definitely have that feeling on like the negative side that we are kind of approaching some cataclysmic, apocalyptic thing, right?
I don't know. I don't know if that's just like a meme that I'm doing, you know, like just kind of being like the doomsayer guy or something. Like I'm trying to carve out a niche in the like in the market. You know what I mean? Like, I'll be the guy that does like doom art or whatever, which is probably already saturated anyways. But like, I think so. I think I'm becoming a little bit more like long view of things. There's only one thing that's sort of in the back of my mind, which is if like all of the feedback loops start to kick off, then maybe we'll in like 2026 or something, like the earth will just be uninhabitable and we'll, you know, all of us will drop dead. But I think you know, I'm moving a little bit away from that, and like I'm still trying to plan for things, and I'm still sort of thinking ahead to the future.
One thing that
a little bit.
Sorry to interrupt. One thing that I think is really valuable to think about maybe is going back to that Overshoot book. I haven't read the book, but I did watch that video overview that Trevor you sent me of the book, and this central idea. He has that graph where you have the one line that's the carrying capacity, right? That's how many organisms can survive. And then you have the population growth is another line, which becomes exponential, and eventually, as it ascends, it crosses over the carrying capacity. And then what happens after that is it continues to grow, but eventually it starts to level out. And this is what he calls the peak, right? And that what happens after that is for that whole duration that the population is above the carrying capacity, the only way that can happen is by depleting the resources for the future, so that the carrying capacity decreases. And the result,
robbing Peter to pay Paul.
Yeah, totally. and so the result being that a crash happens. But it's a little bit more complicated than that. He shows there are actually several different outcomes that could happen. And one, let's say the idealistic outcome would be if we were far-sighted enough to notice when we were even approaching the carrying capacity and being able to level out before we reach that. Now, we're probably past that, right? As far as anyway, what the book Overshoot says is that we're well past that, and actually maybe about to go into the decline section.
Right.
But so then there's that pattern afterward, after the collapse, where it sort of waves up and down, right? The population sort of reaches an equilibrium with the carrying capacity and levels out to create a new stable, sustainable pattern. But that's only one possible solution or outcome. Another outcome being that the population, the carrying capacity hits zero, meaning that we all die.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty unlikely that humanity will actually go extinct. Like, short of some, like an asteroid impact, or like I guess the nuclear power, the nuclear waste thing, I guess could maybe result in that if it does get into like the ocean and all the water and stuff like that. Then I mean maybe, but just from the like kind of ecological agriculture collapsing, I find it very hard to see how that would lead to actual extinction.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's always going to be some people who do manage to survive.
Yeah.
Until we like evolve out of humans.
Yeah.
I think.
And that's one thing that really is actually hopeful for me, is the idea of permaculture and sustainable agriculture, where each individual in the population is contributing some part of their energy to creating their own sustainable food source.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's a comforting idea. I have heard though that there's no way that the current world population could all be like sustenance farmers, right? Like the
and that's a really shitty existence too. Like sustenance farming is like hard as fuck. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like the EROI on that, I think, is like 1-to-1.
But what's the EROI?
Like you spend the energy return on investment. Like you spend all of your time doing it to get that energy back to yourself.
No, but is that with traditional farming approaches, or looking into permaculture and the sort of horticulture approaches where you have multiple plants and animals working in conjunction to create a sustainable ecosystem that you're not necessarily, once it's going, you don't do much of the heavy lifting. You're just sort of cultivating that ecosystem which builds off of itself.
It's a good question.
Yeah, I don't know.
I ask because my parents have gotten extremely into permaculture themselves, and they did a lot of research and classes about all of the practices they're involved therein, and they even went so far as to buy a farm down in Oregon, and they're in the process of building their own house with their own hands, and will then be doing permaculture stuff there.
Cool. Is it far enough away from the coast?
It is actually quite far from the coast.
Okay, good. Should be good for like 400 years or something.
Yeah.
It's in Oregon, right?
Yeah. Although they were very close to the fire that happened a month or two ago.
Oh, shit. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I think, I hope I learn more about that from that class that I'm going to take. Because, I think the whole thing with transition towns is like building like a permaculture, like large scale, like having permaculture for food, but also permaculture for like culture.
Yeah.
Like how you interact with other people and like the economy and, shit like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think one of the major points of that Overshoot book is that, like we said, you can't have, how he puts it, a centralized control of the population. For example, China saying you can only have one child. That doesn't work. And the only solution that might work is to have kind of like a grassroots, almost like a blockchain sort of solution where it's built upon educating and inspiring the populace so that each individual can contribute to a community that's built around those ideals.
Yeah, for sure. It's like that, what that like brought up for me is like, the question gets asked a lot on Collapse, like, do the elites, like the people that, like the, whatever, president of China or Donald Trump or Jeff Bezos, like, do these people who run the world, who own the world, like, do they understand this? And it's like, maybe they do, but like, they just don't care. I mean, and if they do care, like, it's like, it just goes against their interests. You know what I mean? Like, they if they just can't like give up everything.
Yeah,
I mean,
there's so much inertia.
Yeah, and like, I don't know, it's because it's like, why don't they? I mean, things are just massively complex with like wars and shit too. You know what I mean? Like, people just are not going to get along. Like, the idea of like world peace, like,
Yeah,
it's just. So I mean, how do you like have protection or like safety from people who, are like ideologically opposed or whatever opposed to you, who think that you're dumb and stupid and need to die. Like, how do you have protection from that while, living in these kind of, that's part of the problem, I think, is just like, it doesn't seem like, I don't really know what I'm trying to say. It's
No, it's I think I get what you're getting at. I think for political leaders, they have to put their country's interests first, because that's kind of their whole job. And I think that kind of necessitates, like, one, not telling people exactly what their assessment of the situation is, even if they're assessing it accurately, despite what could be very, very dire predictions. They just have to, like, keep everyone calm and still look out for the best interests of their the people who got them elected.
Which really seems like, at least in the United States, that's not the case.
Yeah, definitely. That's the ideal situation, the world the politics that should happen.
Yeah. And I think, like, it definitely will be important to just kind of focus on not yourself, but like your community and your immediate surroundings, because like the whole like global situation is, I think, just, I have no clue.
Too much. It's too big
head.
for any individual or group of individuals to tackle.
Yeah.
I mean, and the reality is that all these things are going to hit developing countries first, and like way harder than it's going to hit us, at least at first. So like,
that's the thing with developing countries too, is they're trying to get where we're at.
Yeah.
So like, they're using resources like, nobody's business, and trying to catch up with where we're at in terms of what we use and how we live, like our standard of living. And what are you going to do? Tell them not to do that? Like, don't get an AC.
Right.
Yeah. Like,
yeah. I mean, really what needs to happen is everyone in developed countries needs to like cut way back on their resources, because it would be impossible for everyone to have our what's the word, standard of living.
I mean, everyone needs to do it. I just have it really does kind of make me laugh a little bit.
Why's that?
Like, I'll just be like walking or thinking or driving and just thinking about all this, and thinking of how complex it is, and it's like really funny. And I guess in kind of like an absurd kind of way.
Yeah, I mean, what else can you do besides either laugh or cry?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, fatalism.
Yeah.
I wanted to like go over some of my favorite like Reddit posts this week too.
Sure.
Maybe I'll do the past like month, like the top 10 from the past month or something.
Sure.
Cause let's see. So number 1, Americans celebrate Dow 30K at their local food bank. And it's just like a picture of like the food lines, I think in Austin, Texas, like the day that the Dow hit 30K. Let's see. Trump just fired the head of the NNSA, the agency that oversees our nuclear weapons safety. So yeah, that's great. Yeah. Let's see. This one says, the mood before you process collapse and all that grief. And it's like a Twitter post of, I need to get my life together, but I'm kind of waiting to see if the world is going to end before I put any real effort in. Let's see.
Not to derail the thing, but I feel like that is probably the feeling of a lot of people, like myself included, a little bit. It's like, especially for our generation, like, you know, actually making a career and you know, having like a, you know, some kind of security already seems like so impossible sometimes.
Yeah.
It's like I think that's definitely part of the appeal of this whole thing.
Definitely. It's like, fuck, like why even put in any effort, which is, you know, like, I think somewhat of a, people would probably say, pretty privileged position to take, you know, like to just be able to kind of say, man, I don't know if I should put in any effort at all into the society if it's just gonna fail. But
Yeah.
you know, I think it's probably a pretty widespread feeling, at least.
Yeah. Yeah, because I mean, the vast majority of people just don't have a choice because they have to, you know, they just have to keep going to, you know, survive.
Yeah. Let's see. I'm gonna skip some of the like picture ones, but there's this one: very violent clashes in Paris as thousands protest the new security law which prohibits to film the police officers. So the Paris people know how to riot, which is nice. I thought this one was interesting when I saw it. Like in 1979, President Carter installed solar panels on the White House. In the year 2000, this solar heater can either be a curiosity, a museum piece, an example of a road not taken, or it can just seem a small part of an American adventure. And Reagan took them down, and the panels are now in a museum. And I mean, even then, like solar panels, you know, like those are techno-hopium. I don't know with what weapons World War III will be fought, but we can safely assume it'll be fought in a mountain of trash. There's 1 in 4 Americans are jobless or earning poverty-level wages, new study finds. Yeah, and I hate to be like that Reddit guy, like, oh, look at the studies, and but, you know, I don't know. This is just how I spend my life, like, scrolling on Collapse. Yeah, I don't know, man. I usually just look at what's on there during the day. Like, I can't go back and look at these posts because it's, like, just this huge deluge of information. And, like...
Yeah, it's like the most concentrated form of doom scrolling.
Yep, pretty much. Yeah, there's that article in the Times, and like, man, I don't know. I definitely should not spend as much time on here as I do, but if I don't know. I guess I just get bored. Yeah. Then I guess back on the page now, like just the page, if you went to it right now, like the first one is a warning on climate and the risk of societal collapse is in The Guardian. So like, I think a lot of people, I mean, like our whole generation, we've kind of grown up with like this climate change in the back of our minds. Speaking of like the Al Gore movie and everything.
Yeah.
But like, maybe it's taken that long for it to like sink in for a lot of people. You know what I mean? Like collapse is such a process that it's, you know, you don't encounter this stuff and you're just like, oh yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's so complex, and I don't know.
Yeah, and slow moving, and like I said, like it doesn't directly affect a lot of people. And you know, even if we can point to stuff like hurricanes getting worse and forest fires getting worse, it's always like, well, it could just be, you know, bad luck that we're having all these things get worse all at the same time.
Yeah.
So it's easy to just like explain it away or say, oh well, the climate's changing, but like it's definitely changing, but humans aren't causing it, or we don't know whether humans are causing it.
I think
the can just keeps getting kicked down the road.
Yeah, I think we have to for our sanity too, because like fully accepting this is like not good, folks.
I think coming to any sort of acceptance of mortality, of loss, is going to change you drastically and leave you in some ways unrecognizable from where you were before. And so in that sense, I think it can give you a really strong sense of impossibility, of you would have to be like that, it would drive you insane. But I think that is a threshold that everyone has to cross over at one point or the other. And when you do, you may find that it's not insanity on the other end. It's just a different form of experience.
For sure. Yeah, it's like a paradigm shift.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's a state of mind that's almost impossible to imagine before you cross over the boundary.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely. I want to say, like, call to action, because I mean, that one post is from the collapse support Reddit, is like, the most important thing you can do is like begin to talk about this with people you know. And I mean, maybe there's a smart way to go about doing that, just not like throwing doom in their face all the time.
Yeah, how do you engage someone who doesn't want to hear about it?
Yeah, maybe you just don't too. Like,
but what you just said, it's like one of the most valuable and important things you can do. So like, how could you?
Yeah,
I mean, to start with, I think it has to be with people who are close to you, who you have like a pretty strong relationship with. Yeah, I mean, where you can even have a serious conversation like that in the first place.
Right.
That's true. Yeah, like, don't just like go up to anyone, like an acquaintance or whatever.
Yeah.
And do it. I mean, I kind of do it on my Instagram a lot, but I mean, it's kind of like a public thing. So
yeah, social media is different, I feel like.
Yeah. I don't know, because like, how do you do it, or should you even? Because I know there are a lot of people that are like, it's not worth your time. Like, because there are some people that are just not going to accept it. Like, they're just going to stay in their world because they want to. And, that's okay. I mean, what's the whole like revolution thing? Like, it takes 3% of a population to really shake shit up. So it's like, you don't need to get everyone on your side. You just need to get like the people that are willing and receptive to hear it. But I don't know.
Well, maybe that's a question that our listeners can help us figure out. If you have any ideas or comments on that, we'd really appreciate if you reach out on social media or send us an email at postwavepodcast@gmail.com.
Yeah. And if you guys are going to link all those links that I sent you, definitely take a look at the collapse support one about like actionable things that you can do. It's definitely a lot to take in, but talk about it with your friends. And yeah, the thing that's been on my mind a lot recently that has been really helpful dealing with grief and sort of fear of death, it's from that Stephen Jenkinson book where he talks about living. Like, a good way to think about it is like is centered around like food, and like, usually you can tell when someone is like ready to die when they stop eating. They're like, they just don't have the energy to feed themselves anymore, and so it's kind of like you have the energy to feed yourself until you don't. Like, you're living until you're not. You get up every day until you don't. And like, it seems really simple, but it's just kind of like a Zen thing to like keep in the back of your mind. Like, you're living, you're breathing until you're not, and you know, that's it.
Totally.